part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
Iguodala to Curry, back to Iguodala, up for the layup. Oh, blocked by James. It's over. It's over. Cleveland is a city of champions once again. The Cavaliers are NBA champions.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for stopping by to Cavs on the Break NBA podcast right here on the Press Play Podcast Network. Happy New Year, everyone. Hope you had a great holiday season. The man I'm talking to here on the pod was a good boy, was on the nice list, and he was deserving with all the nice gifts under the tree. Of course, every day when you read him on hoopswire.com is a treat and a gift for all of us. Isn't that right, Sam?
I sure hope so. This is our first podcast of 2024.
It is.
Right?
Yes. How about that?
Wow. I never thought I would be podcasting in 2024 when I first started doing this, whatever it is I do. So, yeah, I got some nice Christmas gifts. I hope you did too. And I couldn't be more thrilled to see your smiling face in the new year.
Hey, you know what? That's a beautiful thing. I'm glad that you had a great holiday. He is Sam Amico, owner, writer, hoopswire.com. Follow him on Twitter at Amico Hoops. I am John Sabol. Follow me at John_Sabol. Follow the pod at Cavs on the Break. Chase Smith sitting this one out, so you guys are stuck with us here as we record this on January 4th. I have a This Day in Cavaliers history that I just came across, which we'll touch on in a second. But now that the calendar has flipped to 2024, we've got two big Cavaliers topics that we need to discuss on this podcast. One isn't really a big topic, but we can certainly touch on it. Cavs starting off the new year off on the right foot, winning on Wednesday, which was yesterday, January 3rd, with a huge blowout 39-point win, 104-101 against the Wizards. I don't want to spend too much time on this, Sam, because it was a blowout, and Cavs has kind of dominated in the second half, had five guys in double figures, and just kind of took it to Washington in a brutal way late.
Yeah, I was up there at the game, and it was the first half was good, and then I think there was 12 lead changes by the middle of the second quarter, and then all of a sudden the Cavs went on a flurry there to end the second quarter. Donovan Mitchell hit a couple of threes. Max Strus was on fire in the first half, and then the Cavs really ramped up the defense, and the Wizards stink. So add up all those things, and they actually built their lead to 44 points there in the second half. So that's good news. And the good news also for Cavs fans is they play the Wizards again Friday night at home, and then they get the woeful San Antonio Spurs and Victor Wembanyama on Sunday afternoon. So, they should be able to make up some ground as it stands entering today, this very podcast. They are one game back for the fourth seed in the East, behind, I think, the Magic, Knicks, and Heat are all tied for the fourth seed in the East. The Cavs are one game behind all those guys. So it's going to be very, very tight here, and it's nice to be able to get some of these wins. Hopefully you get another one if you're the Cavs against the Wizards on Friday at home, and then the Spurs Sunday at home, and then, pretty soon here you're leaving for Paris.
Which is crazy to think about. And I had a mistake. I forgot the Cavs played the Raptors to start the new year. So they're 1-1 in the new year, losing on New Year's Day. And it's interesting, entering the new year before that Raptors game, the Cavs were only 3 games off of their pace from last year. And I know last podcast, a couple weeks ago, we discussed that a little bit. The Cavs had that great start last year, and then they stumbled. And then this year they had a slow start, but they kind of got it together a little bit. So they're not too far off despite all the injuries, which is pretty remarkable.
Yeah, I think it really says something, about the fact that they did get some depth. You have, Strus, Niang, who, based on my emails and notifications on Twitter, there's not a whole lot of Cavs fans who are thrilled with Niang, but he does offer some things, and I think he's contributed to the fact that they're, winning games in 19 and 15 despite all the injuries. So not just Strus and Niang, but you also have, Karis LeVert, who was re-signed in the offseason. You have Sam Merrill, who's almost, even though he was with the team last year, almost is like a new guy this year, kind of really, coming into his own this season. and has added a big boost. And I don't think anybody thought Craig Porter Jr., who didn't even get drafted, would be this ready for the NBA, as he's proving that he's done the backup point guard. So, guys like that have really added to the whole purpose with guys like Darius Garland and Evan Mobley due to miss significant time, and Donovan Mitchell missing some games, Jared Allen being out at the beginning of the year. It's just, I think that their depth is coming through. Tristan Thompson's been a real nice addition in the limited minutes that he's been playing. So, yeah, it's a testament to the depth that they have on the team and the fact that they're still in this race. And John, I don't think anybody's going to finish higher than Milwaukee, Boston, Milwaukee, Philly. I think those are probably going to be your top 3 seeds in the Eastern Conference. So if you're the Cavs, you're again battling for that 4th seed, and then you're hoping that everybody's healthy and you can play your best when it means most in April and May.
Yeah, I want to touch on a few topics that you just mentioned there, Sam. One, I'll go in reverse order. Yeah, I think you're right. We've kind of mentioned it before in the podcast. I've heard you say it on the radio when you've been on Baskin and Phelps here in Cleveland on 92.3 The Fan. You said that too. Like, Cavs' best case scenario for seeds, barring a collapse, is 4, and I think that's the goal here. And that's okay. That's fine. Then you play a 5 seed. Because last year they were a 4-5 seed, right? Isn't that right?
They were 4 and played the Knicks, who were 5.
Yeah. The other thing you said there that I kind of laughed and chuckled at, when I don't know if you saw me on Zoom here, when you said you get a lot of hate mail of the George Niang haters. So I got a buddy who's an avid listener to the podcast, huge Cavs fan, knows his stuff. I'll just won't say his name, but I'll just say his nickname is Juicy. It's actually his nickname. Yeah,
that's a dead giveaway. It's Chase.
And he is a George Niang hater, and he is also an Isaac Okoro, like Chase, lover, president and CEO of the Isaac Okoro fan club. He and I go back and forth, and my stance has been on this. Anybody that has listened to this podcast for the last 2 or 3 years knows your stance on Isaac Okoro. They've read about it on HoopsWire. They've heard me talk about him. We know Chase loves him. I love the guy. He's a great kid, hard worker, great work ethic, great locker room, mature, whatever. But he hasn't developed that corner 3. It's gotten better. It's not consistent. George Niang's having a horrible start to his career, arguably one of his worst shootings of his career thus far from beyond the arc. And if you look at their numbers are pretty damn similar, which is nuts. And Niang's about averaging 9 more minutes than Okoro. So my buddy always poses the question, well, who do you want on the floor in clutch situations? And my rebuttal still is George Niang, because I need him in a 3. But if you already have shooters on the floor and need defenders, you're going to have Isaac Okoro out there. Yeah. So I think Niang's shooting, if it was better than his career average over almost 40%, he's shooting 33. I think the haterness, I just made up a word, wouldn't be as violent from fans.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't think he's been able to mesh well into the flow yet. He has his moments, and with the injuries, Okoro has been in the starting lineup and has had his moments of, as much as I like to admit it, has had his moments to shine as well. Not consistently enough, but I don't think you're going to get that with this team, with him and these shooters.
Yeah, I think Isaac Okoro is what he is, and I've never had a problem with Okoro. My problem previous seasons, not necessarily this season at all, actually, but in previous seasons, it seemed like the Cavs were really forcing it with him.
Yes.
It just felt like no matter how he plays, and it seemed like the first 3 years, there was a lot of games, more often than not, where Okoro was just sort of running up and down the floor.
Yes.
Not really. He wasn't bad. He just wasn't doing anything. And I know that, he's one of their more solid defenders. This year, I've really come around on Okoro, and, I think that for whatever reason, the Cavs love to start him, and I don't have a problem with that anymore. But I just think that he's still running up and down the floor and doing not much more a lot of nights on offense. There are other nights he's great. Defensively, I think he's better than he's ever been. defensively. So
Mhm.
I've really come around on Okoro. My argument, my defense of Niang is always, I don't know what people were expecting when the Cavs got him. I don't know whether this is basically how he played in Philly. He's an agitator for the other team. He's always talking. He annoys the opposing team. He does knock down shots some nights. Some nights he doesn't. And that's the way he was in Philly. That's just the way he plays. So, anytime you're talking about a guy who's an eighth man, which is what Niang basically is, seventh or eighth man. Now he plays, a lot of minutes, but he's giving you what most seventh and eighth men are going to give you. I look at, okay, here's how I look at things. Really, me, Strus is better than Chetty Osman. Who,
Massively.
right. And Niang, as much as I loved Lamar Stevens when he played, Niang's a better player for the Cavs than Lamar Stevens was. So they've upgraded two positions. I don't know whether people expected Niang to be like a borderline all-star or something when he came here, but to me, he looks not much different than he did during his time in Philly. So I think, now granted, I probably watch a lot more NBA basketball than the average, say, Cavs fan because it's my job. But I think that, because Cavs fans are watching the Cavs. I saw Niang last year in Philly, and there will be nights where he would go nuts, and there will be nights where he's frustrating the home fans and the home team, and just not really making much of a difference and missing wide open shots. That's just a player he is. But he's always out there. You know, he's a guy who's you're going to know he's in the game. And a lot of times with Okoro, I don't want to say a lot of times. I will say a lot of times in the first 3 years, you didn't even realize there was a fifth guy out there. That's how little Okoro contributed. Now this year, I think Okoro has been. I think he's hit his ceiling, and I think that ceiling is pretty decent. He's never going to be an all-star, which you always hope to get with a lottery pick, which the Cavs use a number 5 pick with on Okoro. But I think he's always going to be a solid pro, a guy with a great attitude, very unselfish, willing to be the fifth starter when it comes to shots, and a willing defender. So I've been impressed with Okoro for the most part this season.
What do you think of the adage? I mean, anybody that's played basketball will maybe agree with this. At least I wholeheartedly believe this. When any time at the lowest levels, middle school, high school, college, low end college, D2, D3, whatever, you already have your skill sets, right? So by the time you're in high school, we all know if you're a shooter or not. Would we agree?
Yeah, for the most part, it's very rare if somebody's not a shooter in high school that they become a shooter if they make it to the NBA.
Yeah, it's by 18. Okay.
Right.
Or you don't
Right.
need to get to the NBA, but let's say even if you're 18 years old and you don't play college ball, but you're going to college and playing the intramurals, and you're a shooter or you're not a shooter, right? We all know that.
Right.
You may have
absolutely.
you may have strengths of your game or not, right? So
Yeah.
even if you had all the resources in the world, like NBA players.
Well, Tristan Thompson now in what, year 11, 12, 13, and can't shoot free throws.
Yeah, well, Shaquille O'Neal never shot free throws either.
Can't make them.
So my point where I'm going with this is you are either a shooter or you're not. And for them, the Cavs back then, as we both have said this on the podcast for 2 years, maybe not necessarily this year, forcing Isaac Okoro to be a shooter, to turn into a shooter, was, I think, asking a lot. And while his shooting has improved slightly, he is not a shooter. And I don't think he'll ever will be. So I say this because I got my buddy there who thinks that disagrees and doesn't think that you can develop to be a shooter. And I disagree. You are either a shooter or you're not. You can improve on it, but you're not going to make that giant leap.
Right. Yeah.
And I think the leaps that he has had is probably the best he'll have. And that's not an indictment on Isaac Okoro. That is just who he is. And that's the Cavs need to then, and which they are doing now, molding around that. And they had to because they got Strus and Niang, two guys that play wing positions that basically took his job.
Yeah, when everybody's healthy, that's the case. And We even saw in the playoffs last year, Isaac Okoro kind of got glued to the bench for a little bit because the Cavs needed some additional outside shooting, and he just wasn't that guy. Now he's, again, fine defender, excellent slasher.
Yep.
Those are the things that he was. Those were the things he was known for coming into the NBA, being a slasher and a good defender and a good athlete and a guy who's going to work hard. And kudos to him for doing all those things, but it doesn't necessarily fill a need in the starting lineup.
Yep,
I
agree.
off the bench, sure, but in the starting lineup, I've never understood that. Now, granted, with all the injuries, absolutely, Isaac Okoro should be starting. But, I'm with you on that. I don't think that you're going to develop, Isaac Okoro is never going to be Mark Price.
Never.
He's not going to be even Max Strus. He's not going to be that kind of shooter where he gets even streaky. He shouldn't really be taking too many. There's a reason that the defense leaves him open in the corner because they'll take their chances with that. And that's probably always going to be Isaac Okoro's game. And I give him a lot of credit because he doesn't force anything from there. He'll take it if it's open sometimes, but he never forces.
I was just going to say, he's not even going to be a Bob Sura from shooting.
No.
But then I remember Bob Sura wasn't a great shooter. Then I just looked up his stats real quick. Okoro has a better career 3-point percentage than Bob Sura by 1%.
That's not a huge surprise. Yeah.
No,
so maybe he will be a Bob Sura.
Yeah. All right. Enough with that topic. That was one thing that I've been getting listener hate mail, tweets, and texts about that. Two other big things we'll talk about as we sit here on January 4th. Big news, the biggest Cavs news. I guess we could have started off with this, but it's not all that surprising. Ricky Rubio announced his retirement from the NBA after 12 seasons in the NBA, his final 2 in Cleveland, after reaching a buyout with the Cavs for his final 2 years on his contract. Sam, we kind of knew this was happening after he stepped away from the game over the summer with mental health, and I hope he's getting all the help that he can get and support that he has been receiving over in Spain. The Cavs have been awesome with him and supporting him, so give credit to the organization for that. Before he hurt his knee, that ACL injury, man, it looked like he was having a revitalization of his NBA career. But Ricky Rubio suffered that ACL tear, his second one, I think, right? And retires here at the age of 33. He just turned 33 in October. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think, you talk about his first stint with the Cavs, which was, I don't know how many games that was, maybe 20, 25, somewhere in there, 25, 30. That first run with the Cavs was probably one of the best stretches.
34
games. Okay. It was one of the best stretches, 34 game stretches that, any reserve, he really was reserved most of the time behind Sexton and Garland when Sexton was healthy. Of course, Sexton only played 6 games, I think, that season. But, Rubio really was a coach on the court who did more than just direct traffic. I remember Colin Sexton saying at one point, to him, Ricky Rubio, he was like, with Darius and I, you get a little wild out there sometimes, and Ricky will come in and calm everything down and get everything organized and still, have the ability to put up points. He was the ultimate setup guy when it came to those 34 games, Yeah. And then he unfortunately tore the ACL, had some surgery, got traded to Indiana for Karis LeVert in that trade that brought back Karis LeVert. And he also, then he re-signed with the Cavs after that, and just clearly, obviously, you're not going to be the same guy after you tear your ACL and you're a guard.
Right.
And he didn't have much time. It was a very small window last season, but just wasn't the same. So, but that 34 run, ultimate professional, and I like how in his little memo, his little note in which he was announcing his retirement, how he specifically, gave extra praise to Cleveland, and this is his last team, his last NBA team. So he was in that stretch before he hurt his knee, the unfortunate knee injury, just really, really helped, I think, these younger guys such as Garland and Jared Allen and Mobley. I think he really helped them believe, you know what, we can win in this league. We don't have to be just a young team or guys who are getting beat on because LeBron James left a few years ago. We can win, and I really think that Rubio really installed a lot of belief, helped install a lot of belief in the guys when he first came.
In that statement, excuse me, he said, I'll just read the last paragraph, the paragraph you're alluding to. It says, quote, special mention to Cleveland, my last home. I know the way things ended have been tough. I could never have managed the year would develop this way, but you have an amazing organization with Colby and JB who have been extremely respectful and understanding of my situation and caring for me as a person, end quote. Yeah, class act all the way. Was when the Cavs got him, was the perfect person to kind of mold those three young guys in. Colin Sexton was here. And then, Sam, when you look at his numbers, my goodness, he played 12 years in the league and 7 with the Timberwolves, 2 with the Jazz, 2 with the Cavs, 2 with the Suns. His 2 best years when it comes to points per game were with the Cavs and one of the years in Utah, and he averaged 13.1 points a game. Granted, when he did that with Cleveland, he did that in 34 games. When he did that in Utah in the 2017-18 season, he did that in 77 games. A consistent player, when you really think of his numbers in production, and his assist totals were still pretty high too. So got a little lower as he got older, but that's also coming off the bench and not starting as much. But okay, so now the Cavs, with that buyout, they free up some money. I don't know how much exactly. Maybe between 6 to 10 million ish, something like that, over the next 2 years.
Yeah, I think it's probably closer to probably like 8 over the next 2 seasons over 2 years. Yeah,
you get a roster spot. What do you think the Cavs would do with that open roster spot? Do you think you just keep it open, no rush, or is that something that you maybe have for bringing up a guy from the charge like an Amani Bates or an Isaiah Mobley, or do you just keep it open in the event that you make a trade just for a filler?
Yeah, I think right now the plan is to just keep it open. Obviously, they've done some nice things through all the injuries and are playing okay, despite all the injuries. And it's really it's an asset. Anytime you have an open roster spot, like I said, if they need to make a trade February, they feel like, okay, let's upgrade the roster. We can add 2 guys, for the price of 1 potentially. Or there's free agents out there veteran free agents that are out there that could potentially come in and fill it and help. But I don't think they're in any hurry at this point. I'd be surprised if they sign anybody within the next 2 or 3 weeks anyway.
Yeah, I would agree. No rush at all. So Ricky Rubio done. Cavs, as we sit right here, play tomorrow night against the Wizards. We're going to take a break real quick here on Cavs on the Break NBA podcast right here on the Press Play Podcast Network. On the backside, Sam's going to address, maybe for the last time this season, the Donovan Mitchell rumors and an article that he posted on Hoops Wire. If you haven't had a chance to read it, we're going to get into that in a moment. Cavs on the Break NBA podcast coming up right after this. You can't see us. Sam and I are on Zoom at both of our houses, and you can't see the shirts that we're wearing. We are wearing brand spanking new Homage t-shirts. If you are from the Cleveland area, Columbus, you all know this company that is helping us out here. Boy, they have designed quite the array of NBA gear, Cavs gear, Major League Baseball, NFL, official licenses. Sam, what Homage shirt are you wearing of the Cavaliers at the moment? What is that? Is that your boy, Austin?
Austin, I'm so old school. It's Austin Carr as a player, and I'm sad to say that I don't remember I don't remember Austin as a player, just as a fan favorite, as a color analyst and in-game analyst. But I have watched him on YouTube and all that. So yeah, when I saw this shirt, I was just like, I have to have it. It's AC, not only as a player in the old school Cavs uniform, but of course the AC I know and love, always smiling about something. So it's perfect for me. I love NBA history and old school stuff, and the fact that I would consider it Austin Carr a friend. I just very much look forward to wearing this T-shirt in front of him and having him tell me how great I am because I'm wearing it, probably for no other reason, but at least he'll tell me I'm great.
AC's always smiling, and if I want to be around him when you wear that shirt in front of him, because his grin's gonna get even bigger and bigger.
I think we should meet at center court at halftime or something in front of fans. That would be my goal.
You know what? I'll wear my Homage shirt that I got of the Cavs NBA Jam shirt had the stats of Mark Price and Brad Daugherty. That's the one I have.
Yeah.
They were nice enough to send me another one. It was a gray with the old school Austin Carr era Cavs wine and gold script on it. I know Chase was rocking a wine hoodie with the new Cavs font on the front of it. Just some awesome products there. Perfect gift this holiday season. So if you can, go on our show notes here, wherever you're listening to your podcast, on Spotify, on Apple, or any other location there, wherever you're seeing our description of our show, scroll on down. You'll see the link. You can buy your Cavs gear, Browns, Guardians, Ohio State, MAC, you name it. Great quality product right there on the Homage website. Go on our show notes, click that link there.
What's up, everyone? I'm Holly Wetzel.
And I'm Tigers Powell.
And we are your hosts of The Orange is Oranger, a Cleveland Browns podcast on the Press Play Podcast Network. We give you all the dog pound coverage that you'll need to get you through the regular season, hopeful postseason, and I'd say off-season, Tyvis, but is there really ever an off-season for this team?
Thankfully for our podcast, Holly, there really never is when it comes to the Cleveland Browns. Don't miss our breakdown of each week's matchup, game recaps, and any and all news out of Berea to feed your Browns appetite. As we know, Holly, dogs gotta eat.
Yes, they do. So hit that subscribe button and never miss an episode of the Orange is Oranger, Cleveland Browns podcast on the Press Play Podcast Network.
Looking for new insights on the Cleveland sports scene with a unique side of Cleveland sports history? Then you found the perfect podcast. I'm John Sabol.
And I'm Scott Sabol, and we're hosts of the Sabol Brothers on the Baseline podcast, a podcast about Cleveland sports, but not your typical podcast about the land's sports teams. Join us as we embark on a journey of sharing a unique and historical side of Cleveland sports history with the help of some former Cleveland sports stars and other historical figures.
All right here on the Sabol Brothers on the Baseline podcast, part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
Hi, everybody. It's John Tellage from the Guardians of the Land MLB podcast. Be sure to hop on with us to follow all the dramatic developments of the reigning American League Central Division champions. From game analysis to interviews to keeping tabs on who could be the next breakout star. We'll have that and much, much more right here. It's the Guardians of the Land MLB podcast on the Press Play Podcast Network. Subscribe here and join the fun.
Welcome back to Cavs on the Break NBA podcast. John Sabol alongside Sam Amico. Chase Smith sitting this one out here. All right, Sam, we addressed the Cavs 1-1 start after the new year. They play the Wizards tomorrow on January 5th. As we record this on the 4th, we debated a little bit the Niang Okoro, fun little argument there. And then, of course, Ricky Rubio retiring. 2 weeks ago, when you and I recorded a podcast, the hot topic was the Donovan Mitchell rumor. And that has been a hot topic for a while. But with that, start that they're having with the injuries, there's a lot of speculation of what he would do. We both said at the time, Cavs aren't going to do anything. Now comes the report that you just had on hoopswire.com this week. Care to elaborate a little bit on that report?
Yeah, well, first of all, it was an opposing GM who said he thinks that Mitchell's ultimately going to end up signing an extension with the Cavs, which is nothing like what's being reported, or that a lot of people in media and fans and out of New York want to believe. But the bottom line is, since we last recorded, the Knicks obviously made that trade for OG Anunoby, sending RJ Barrett and Emmanuel quickly to the Raptors. And, they're determined to see how this team plays out with Brunson, Anunoby, and Julius Randle as their quote unquote big three. But they also feel like they have a lot of nice pieces around those guys. Obviously, when Mitchell Robinson comes back next season, that'd be another thing. the reason the GM mentioned this, that he thinks Mitchell's going to sign the extension, the GM said he doesn't think Mitchell wants to. If Mitchell were to leave in free agency, he doesn't think he would want to go anywhere but New York. He said, I think I'm getting the impression that he really likes Cleveland. He likes playing for the Cavaliers and the organization. He's fine with the city. Mitchell's not, here's a guy who played in Salt Lake City, which is not obviously a place where a lot of NBA players dream of going, or, for whatever reason. There's not much nightlife there. So, that's not an insult. It's a beautiful area. And I lived in Salt Lake City for a while, loved it. But, and Donovan Mitchell didn't have a problem playing there. He's not that kind of guy. According to this GM, the only place that he would want to play if he were to leave Cleveland is New York. Well, now that New York made this trade with Anunoby, they basically will have to, there's granted all kinds of things can change. They can make some trades and all this before Mitchell becomes a free agent, but they would have to shake up the team, shake up the roster in order to sign him as a free agent. They can no longer afford it because they're going to sign OG Anunoby after the year. He's due for an extension, and they just signed Jalen Brunson to that huge contract last summer. So they're just not going to be able to do it. They're not going to be able to make that happen. That's number one. Number two, a little known fact, which people seem to miss, is the Knicks are not pursuing Donovan Mitchell. They're not one of the teams that called the Cavs when Garland and Mobley went down and people were calling to see if Mitchell might be available. The Knicks aren't in hot pursuit of Donovan Mitchell by any stretch right now. If he were to fall into their laps, that might be something different. But he's not. They're not pursuing him. According to this GM, Donovan Mitchell has no desire to play for the Nets. It's not, I just want to get back to New York. I want to go and live in New York. That's not it.
That was my next question, actually, but I'm glad you cleared that up.
Okay, and I will say this before we get to your question. As a GM told me, which I thought was a wonderful line, is, he could sign an extension with the Cavs, who could pay him more money than anybody else. They're giving him a chance. Eventually, these other teams, Boston, Milwaukee, Philly, those teams might fall off a little bit, and they're going to give him a good chance to compete for, something much bigger than he is right now in Cleveland. And number two, New York's always going to be there. He said he can go back anytime. He could, at the end of his career, he could go retire a Knick after a very fruitful career in Cleveland in which he made a lot of money. So I think that there are possibilities. You need to get him signed to an extension at some point next season. But I think I agree with this GM is that it's not a real strong possibility that he goes to New York.
Well, my question was, Brooklyn's in New York, but that GM shot that down. The next question is, if you're the Cavs, do you really want to re-sign him? Because do you want to keep going with this Mitchell Garland? Or are you going to pick between the two? You and I were texting about that this week. Who knows? That's a good problem to have.
Yeah.
And it's very premature to talk about that, obviously. But,
the window's been very small.
Sure. Year and a half.
A year and a half. And plus, Garland's been hurt now for quite a bit of it. And or Mitchell, they really, it seems like they've had maybe a season together when you talk about actual court time on the court together.
And I'll say this about Mitchell. We have talked a lot about it. He has embraced Cleveland. And like LeBron, when LeBron was here, I know he was from here, obviously, and he had, there was all those rumors his first go around in 2010 that he was going to go to New York, and New York's always going to be there. It's very kind of similar but different, if that makes any sense, not to contradict my statement there, but you know what I mean? It was very, that thought process was the same. You're not going to gut the team, even though the Knicks were probably a shell of they were a better team now than they were back then. But Donovan is not a type of guy to talk his way out or request a trade. He never requested a trade out of Utah. So
no,
he is very believable. I don't think he's lying. He really embraces it. He was at the Browns game a couple weeks ago against, I think, the Jaguars game on the sidelines pregame. He's been to a lot of Guardians game, big baseball guy. His dad works for the Mets. So, New York's also a quick flight away. So We'll see. I don't think this is the end of it, but right now I think we could maybe put that to bed until the offseason, depending on where it goes.
I think the offseason that we're going to know.
Yeah.
We're going to know this offseason.
Yeah.
I don't think we know now. And
Sure.
I think all the speculation doesn't make sense, but the offseason, yeah. I think everything, the Cavs will determine the Mitchell Garland backcourt, and it all depends on how everything plays out this year.
Yep.
And then in the offseason, we're going to know what's next for Donovan Mitchell.
Hey, and you know what? The Cavs keep playing like this, and they're a couple games off their pace last year. They'll get in the playoffs. They just and with all these injuries, it's still been quite enjoyable to see them not crumble. Granted, the schedule has been pretty favorable for them as well. Spurs coming up here after the Wizards, Nets, Bulls, Bucks on the 17th. That's your next slate coming up here. Sam, closing thoughts. I can't say that before we hop off here on this edition of Cavs on the Break.
Can you give me real quick what happened with this date in Cavs history?
Oh, that's right. This date in Cavs history, it was actually yesterday, so that we're recording this here on the 4th. It was 1981, January 3rd, 1981. The Cavaliers retired Austin Carr's number, 34.
That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
Thanks for reminding me of that before we got off.
That's all we need. That could have been a whole podcast.
That's all we need. Yeah, it was like a small little thing I saw it on my list. And I'm like, oh, AC, baby. Number 34. And it's funny, back in the old days, the Coliseum, you look up there, there's only a few. There's Austin Carr, Bobby Bingo Smith, and Nate Thurman. That was it.
Nate Thurman, yep.
Doherty, Price, and Nance didn't happen until the Gund Arena. All right, thank you for listening. You can follow Sam at Amico Hoops on Twitter. Follow yours truly, John_Sabol. Follow the pod at Cavs on the Break on Twitter. Follow and read hoopswire.com. All your latest Cavs and NBA news. Sam is putting out some great stuff, including that article there on Donovan Mitchell. We'll be back next week. Hopefully Chase will be with us as well. Until then, thanks for listening, everyone.
Congratulations, Cleveland. Your decades-long wait is finally over. The Cavaliers are NBA champions.